Welcome to our conference session, Item Bank Hygiene. Is your bank squeaky clean or is there dirt in the crevices? Today we're going to talk about pool item review philosophy in general and how two very different programs implement it. Laura and I are program managers who work directly with these programs to assist them in being successful. My name is Susan Cooley. I'm a senior program manager at Alpine and I live in Oak Harbor, Washington.
Laura Brooks, program manager with Alpine in Alexandria, Virginia.
I'm Michelle Cohn. I live in Washington, D.C., and I'm an assistant vice president of examination at NCARB.
Hi, I'm Heidi Schreifels with F5 Networks. I am coming to you from Spokane, Washington, on the eastern side of the state.
Alpine Testing Solutions has two sides of the business, professional consulting and software development. As you can see from this slide, we offer everything from consulting, program and test development, security, all the way through to exam maintenance. We have a proprietary candidate management system called CertMetrics.
At Alpine, validity is our North Star. Every step of our exam development and maintenance process helps to establish and build strong validity arguments for our clients' tests. As an employee-owned company, we recognize that our success is truly dependent on our clients' success. We are all invested in your program and becoming a trusted extension of your team.
The National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, or NCARB, works with 55 state and jurisdictional licensing boards on the licensure of architects in the U.S. You can see our mission statement on your screen there. We develop and administer numerous programs, both for licensure candidates and for licensed architects seeking professional reciprocity. The Architect Registration Exam, or ARE, is one of those programs. It's required by all 55 licensing boards, and currently about 20,000 candidates are testing on the ARE. You can see there we typically have about 35,000 administrations per year. Our numbers are a little bit different this year, of course, because of COVID, but that is typically where we're at. The ARE is made up of 6 separate divisions that candidates can take in any order and at any time that they choose. They just need to pass all 6 divisions within a 5-year period to be considered ARE complete. Our ARE is written by our ARE Item Development Committee. This is a standing committee at NCARB made up of about 50 volunteer SMEs who are all licensed architects throughout the U.S. They apply for and are accepted for a 1-year appointment and collectively write, on average, 500 to 600 items per year. They do this through a combination of in-person meetings and homework and webinars in between those meetings. Again, this year we've moved some of our in-person meetings to virtual, and so we have learned how to still complete that same work that we would get done at a meeting through a virtual facilitation.
F5 Networks is a global technology company. We specialize in the delivery, security, performance, and optimization of web applications. F5 certified exams are developed to achieve consistently reproducible results that guarantee excellence in those who achieve their certification. This is why we chose to partner with Alpine for all of our exam development needs and our candidate management system, CertMetrics. We consider Alpine an extension of our team. We have 32,000 candidates registered in our closed program. 10,000 have taken exams and 4,000 are currently certified. Our program is a global program. We have certified candidates in 160 countries, and we deliver approximately 300 to 400 practice exams per month. Here's a visual of our exams. All of our candidates must start at the 101. That is where their journey begins, and they have to go through to the point where they feel most comfortable and confident in their certification. Many have achieved the highest level of our certification. Our program does not require anything other than our candidates passing our exams to become certified, and our candidates who become certified generally become the best advocates for our program. Our SMEs who develop our exams are all volunteers. They're all certified within the F5 certification program. They are pulled from our global community. We enlist new subject matter experts for every exam that we develop, if it's a refresh or a brand new exam. We have 4 to 5 in-person exam workshops a year, typically, and in those workshops, 12 to 14 subject matter experts per workshop. During those workshops, the SMEs write 300 items per exam. We work with Alpine to do the item writing, and the instruction and teaching has been great. Our candidates learn the proper way to write an item, and we have ruined them for many other exams and other certifications that they've taken.
So what is pool review? It's the ability to review the items in the bank. This is outside of typical item development and usually after the items have been on forms for a while. When designing your pool review process, it's important to establish guidelines to ensure consistent and repeatable process, as everyone involved has the same expectations. You should have multiple reviewers or subject matter experts so you can reduce bias and ensure consensus across your employees, partners, distributors, etc. It's also important to establish parameters on how and why to save items, delete them, or revise them.
So why would an organization conduct a pool review? Well, simply put, things change. In some industries, especially in the IT sphere, things can change very quickly. New product releases or software updates can make your test items out of date very rapidly. In other fields, it may not happen quite as often, but it's still just as important to make sure that the items on your exams are accurate. A pool review process helps to ensure that the items on your tests are still accurate and appropriate for that test. Your reviewers may also be reviewing the item's statistical performance to determine if it's functioning as it should.
So what would warrant the need for a pool review? Sometimes it's driven by the industry, new software technology, or new guidelines or rules within your industry. There could be a triggered response, such as when you refresh an exam or if there's an exposure to a set of items. Quite frequently, its timing is established for a pool review. For example, it could be annually or every X number of years. Finally, availability of SMEs or a committee appointment to review the items. It's important to think about this as you determine what is important for your program and within your industry.
So why does NCARB do a pool review? Often it's because it's just the right time. We typically do pool reviews every 5 to 7 years, and that specific timing typically aligns with other changes that are happening. That might be a major update to a test specification. It might also have to do with content updates. Within the architectural profession, there are cyclical updates to both model building codes and standard contracts. So sometimes updates in those are a great time to also review all of the item bank. We also stay aware of technology changes that might also affect a pool review. In our most recent pool review, which stretched from the fall of 2018 until late spring 2019, we were actually upgrading from the current version of our item bank software into a new version of that same software. It was a great time to also do the pool review because we were able to create duplicate item banks, keeping one in the original software and maintaining test delivery through that version, while we did pool review on the duplicate bank that was actually in the new version of the software. This avoided a need to track versioning for individual items, and it also allowed us to do some testing of that new software version prior to delivering exams to our candidates.
Why does F5 do a pool review? Rapid change of technology, just like Michelle said, it's very important. Also security. F5 is a security company. We do our very best to mitigate exposure of our exams either through security breaches or just frequency of delivery. So a pool review is very important to ensure that items aren't exposed too much and or compromised. We do this during an exam refresh, and we do this to ensure that the exam blueprints are aligned. We develop a new blueprint for every exam, so we want to make sure that any item we have delivered to our candidates aligns properly with the blueprint, with the minimally qualified candidate, and any of those nuances can be addressed through this pool review to maintain the quality and integrity of our exams. We also do it to improve the language. We want to make sure that our items are easily understood because we deliver to a global audience. So we really try to go in and simplify the English language to a technical language that's understood and equitable to everyone who takes our exams.
When establishing your approach to pool review, there are many process options that you can consider. It really comes down to your available resources. How many subject matter experts will you have access to, and how much time do you have? Are there going to be other obligations for those subject matter experts, or will they be fully dedicated to just doing item review? Will other processes like item writing be paused during this time? The next question you need to ask is how many items will be reviewed? Are you going to do a full bank review? There are definitely pros to this approach. All of your items will be set to the same standard. Your bank will be completely cleaned up at the end of the process. However, this can be very resource intense and also very time consuming. You can also review a subset of your items. This could be date-driven, meaning that the older items are reviewed while the more newly written items are left untouched. This will be less resource intense than a full bank review, but then again, not all of your items will then be updated to the same standard. You can also look at metadata or keyword flags to determine which items to review during your full review. That can be very targeted. For example, if one regulation changes, you can then only focus your review on that particular regulation and the items impacted by that change. You can also do that on demand. So when things change, that's when you go in to review those items. You also have decisions on whether to do things live or distributed. So if you'll do this as a fully facilitated process, where one facilitator or multiple facilitators leads a group through reviewing each item together, or through a distributed process where there's homework assigned and then you need to be able to remediate the results of that homework. That may require more resources because you'll have to have someone who can remediate those homework assignments and determine what the outcome of those items should be. I think the two most important questions you need to ask yourself when determining your approach to pool review is how many reviewers or remediators do you have and how long do you have to do the work? So when you're determining what your approach is going to be, you can think of it in terms of a scale. Some of the decisions that you have to make will be based on your available resources, and they will tip you to either potentially a live process or a distributed process. You can see the different criteria here. If you remove some of these and narrow it down, it might tip your scale in favor of a live approach. For example, if you have a smaller pool of items to review, you have time to complete the work and have a lot of facilitation resources, it may make more sense for you to take that live approach, and Heidi will talk about how F5 used that approach. Likewise, if you have a larger pool of items to review and you would potentially like to use fewer facilitation resources, it might tip you in favor of a distributed review with homework assignments, and that's the approach that Michelle at NCARB ended up taking. Either way, the decisions that you make will need to be based on your resources and the criteria for your specific program.
The NCARB approach to pool review is about reaching consistency in the item bank. Of course, every item will be unique, but because our live forms contain items developed in multiple development cycles, we appreciate the chance in the pool review to look at all of our items through a shared lens. This is about making sure that all items still are relevant to the profession and still meet the intent of the test specification. This is also a chance to update older items to adhere to current item writing rules and guidelines. So the NCARB approach to pool review was to take our existing item writing committee, I mentioned we have that standing committee for item development, and we decided to rebrand it as our pool review committee, meaning we would take a break from writing items during the time that we were doing a pool review. We decided that we would stick with our hybrid system of both in-person meetings and homework in between those meetings, but we also knew that we had 1 year to review all of our items. Again, we're taking a break from writing items, so we really want to make sure that we can finish the pool review within that 1 year time frame so we can quickly get back to item writing the following year. So before we even got into a lot of the planning details, we decided we wanted to add an extra meeting to our schedule and add more SMEs to the committee just to make sure that we'd be able to get all that work done. Knowing that we had a large item bank to review, we decided to prioritize the items just to keep it easier to track the items and motivate the SMEs as we were moving through the process. Our first priority was items that had current statistics associated with them. Also, items that were currently pre-testing, as we were, of course, still delivering forms at the same time that we were doing item review, and recently written items. If they were recently written, then they should be in good shape. Those were our first priority items because they would be needed to develop our forms for the following year. Of course, forms assembly activities still go on even during a pool review year. Our second priority items were items that had been written more than a couple years ago, but that we were confident were still going to fit the test specification. And our third priority items were, again, those older items, but items where we were not confident about them fitting the test spec. And sure enough, those did turn out to be the dinosaurs of the bunch, and many of those did ultimately get retired.
F5 conducts item reviews in conjunction with item writing workshops. The review includes a rash item statistical review as well as it follows a thorough health check. Each exam is written and refreshed separately with different groups of subject matter experts. During the workshops, the SMEs are sequestered. We don't let them go anywhere. As an added measure of security, we use a two-factor authentication, and we collect the physical devices at the end of each day. So our SMEs don't have any homework, but it gives us an added measure of control, security, lockdown on all of our items that they may have exposure to. The first week of the item development workshop is when we actually go in and do the cleanup of the items. Half of the SMEs are writing new items while the other half is reviewing the existing ones. And we are brutal. It's either a review, reject, or revise. Our subject matter experts know the technology inside and out, so they can quickly identify whether an item is worth keeping and as is, or if it needs to be revised. We're measuring it back against the blueprint. We're measuring it against technical accuracy and relevancy. And if it can be promoted to a scored version of exam, it goes forward. If it needs to be revised, we do it in real time so that we can capture that change and revision immediately to improve that item. Our intent is to keep items that are relevant and discard those are not relevant and no longer apply to the blueprint. And any extra items that go above and beyond the ones that we would deem appropriate for a beta and then a scored exam will go on to our practice exams. To ensure that our item bank is clean, organization is critical. We've conducted the health check on the current version of the exam. We've kept the items that we want for the next version of the exam. We go in and declassify all the ones that we don't want or that we have to move over from the previous objectives. It's a bit of a challenge, but making sure that it's organized and things are copied into a new bank is critical. We don't stop delivering our scored exams while we're refreshing or developing new ones. So aligning with that new blueprint, making sure that everything is all there together and that the items that were reviewed and approved to move forward, as well as the ones that are newly written, come together in a new bank really has proven to be successful for us because it ensures that we're treating this as a new item bank and there isn't any crossover or confusion with delivering items that may or may not have been revised on an exam that's currently being delivered. So we leave that operational bank untouched and it continues to perform as we would expect it to and as our candidates expect it to.
It's vital to iron out the process details prior to diving into the reviews. Programs may review for content relevancy, quality of response options, blueprint alignment, potentially inclusive of mapping to a new blueprint. How will the reviews be conducted? In the item bank or in another tool? How will we track changes and review progress? How will SME disagreement be handled? Will you duplicate your item bank and complete the review in a new bank? This is important if the current bank is being delivered live and you don't want to affect the current bank. This will allow you to flip a switch once your review process is complete. What's your degree of change policy? What, if any, changes can be made to an item without retesting it again? Do you need to track versioning and item IDs? Other considerations include item rationales and reference requirements if they've changed over time. Will the review include a statistical review to determine how the item is behaving on a form? As you can see, it's best to think through quite a few details prior to jumping in and reviewing items.
NCARB used a two-part review process for our pool review. I mentioned previously that we prioritize groups of items within our bank. So for each of those groups of items, we started with a macro level review. So this was a high level gut check. Is the item appropriate to keep within the item bank? This was a first reduction of the bank. In our second part of the review, we did what we call the micro review. And this was a much more detailed level look at each item. And this is where we started to talk about potential edits to the items that would make them a better fit to be able to leave within the item bank. This was also a point where we did reduce the items. It was our second reduction of the item bank. So within the macro review, each of our SMEs asked 4 questions about each item that they looked at. The first was, does the content match the test spec? And second, does the cognitive level match the test spec? Our test specification is made up of objectives, of course, that incorporate various content, but also derived from Bloom's taxonomy. Each of our objectives is written to an understand and apply level or analyze and evaluate. So this was a good opportunity for us to take another look at those items and make sure that they matched for both content and cognitive level. If they didn't match one or the other of those, then we ask the question, is there a better objective that that item could be assigned to? Lastly, we also ask the question, is this item relevant to the current practice of architecture? Again, knowing that some of our items had been developed over multiple development years, it was important to think about how the practice of architecture has evolved, and is that item still relevant? This is a question, of course, that could be relevant to a lot of different licensure exams. Replace the word architecture with your profession, and it's always a great question to ask as part of the pool review. In our micro review process, I mentioned this was a more detailed level check. We divided this up into what the candidates see and what the candidates don't see. As far as what the candidates see, of course, this is the STEM, the key, distractors, and the graphics, wanting to make sure that all of these are current and accurate. I mentioned the cyclical updates within the architecture profession regarding codes and contracts. This was a good chance to make sure that everything matched the latest updated versions of those documents. As far as what candidates don't see, here we focused on references and rationales. Our SMEs are required to provide references and rationales for every item they write, just as backup for the validity of that particular item. We want to make sure that our references weren't too old. We decided 15 years was the maximum age of a reference that we would allow. And then, of course, the rationales. We wanted to make sure that they were complete, documenting why a key was correct, why the distractors were incorrect, and making sure that we had good backup for why that item was still a valid question to be included on the assessment. And lastly, I want to highlight the degree of change decisions that we made as part of this. We agreed that any item where we edited information that the candidates would see would definitely need to be re-pilot tested. However, updates to information that candidates did not see, we could maintain the current status of that particular item, whether pre-test or operational. And finally, we left ourselves wiggle room on this. We figured we weren't going to be able to foresee every potential edit that a SME might propose. So we agreed early on with our psychometricians that there were going to be discussions that we would have during the process. And sure enough, there were some negotiations on a case-by-case basis. Overall, though, it was really helpful to both the NCARB team and the Alpine team that we had these discussions at the very beginning of this process before we got into item review and potential item edits, that we were all on the same page as far as what degree of change would be acceptable and what wouldn't.
The F5 process. We do our exam refreshes every 18 to 24 months, and that's when we go in and review and clean up our item banks. We review everything again. As I mentioned, we sort of start from the beginning. We look at the minimally qualified candidate, which we had redefined in an earlier process. We double check back to the blueprint, the objectives. We're looking for technical accuracy. We want to make sure that the information is still relevant and that the cognitive complexity aligns. So very similar to Michelle and NCARB's approach to it to ensure that quality and integrity of our items. We also go through and tighten up our language. So that it's easily understood. Our exams are only delivered in English, but to a worldwide audience of candidates who English is a second language for many of them. Additionally, our technology is extremely complicated, so keeping the items simple, keeping the questions simple, the STEM, the story, as well as the answers and distractors is really important. If a candidate gets it wrong, gets an item wrong, we want it to be because they didn't know the technology, not because they didn't understand the item. So keeping that item bank cleaned up and the language simple really helps with that. We also look at our exhibits to make sure that they are accurate, they display properly, and that everything is still okay with those and our references. We definitely want our exams to be legally defensible, so having references that point to why this item is relevant and important and should be on the exam and the candidate should be tested on it is important to follow up with that. Our facilitator leads this process. Our SMEs come to a collective decision and agreement, which is sometimes a challenge, but we edit in real time and that facilitator captures the information, and it really has proven an effective method for our process. So the degree of change, as I mentioned before, we are looking at everything